You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Today I'm joined by Chelsea Riffe, a mindset, manifestation, and podcast coach. Chelsea's story is just so awesome. On paper, she had many of the things most of us strive for. A six-figure income, success at work, fabulous brunches, the ability to book a trip wherever she wanted, and the luxury condo. But as she says, something just felt internally so off. So what did she do? Well, she left her job, moved abroad to Australia, and ultimately found her way. She moved to Bali and received her yoga and meditation certification, and more recently she's moved again to Europe and started her own business. She credits a mindset shift and learning more about her own spirituality with changing her life for the better. Today, she helps her clients through guidance, support, and major hype to feel empowered to share their stories and their voices in business and in life. She offers one-on-one mindset coaching, courses, workshops, and has a podcast called In My Non-Expert Opinion. What I appreciate so much about Chelsea is that she candidly shares the ups, the downs, and the how-tos of actually making such incredible changes in her life. We talk about her experience in therapy, her business. We talk about how to make manifestation and meditation part of your daily life. And honestly, so much more that I could never fit into this intro. So you'll have to listen to the episode, obviously. And make sure to tune in after the show for my final thoughts. Here's Chelsea. Hey, Chelsea. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hello. I'm so glad to be here.
I am just so pumped. I've followed you for, I guess, maybe about a year now and listened to your show. And I don't know. I feel like I'm talking to a celebrity. I'm very excited.
Oh my God, you're so sweet. I'm so excited that you are having me on. I can't wait to chat.
Yeah, so I find your story super interesting, and I guess maybe we'll start there. I hope that you can kind of take me back to the day you decided to up and leave that corporate job of yours. What was going through your head, how you got to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. So my corporate job, I actually really loved it. It was a really fun job. I worked in a really fun environment. I had cool bosses and I was making great money. And the weird part though was I felt really empty inside and it made no sense. Like I said, I lived in an amazing condo. I was making a lot of money. I had good friends, good coworkers, but I just always felt like I could be doing something more. And I think really where that came from was because I got my undergrad degree in broadcast journalism and I wanted to be a sports reporter. And then I went to my master's and got a degree in digital media and storytelling. And the job I was working in was working with content creators, placing them in partnerships with brands and, different types of companies. And I always felt like, wait, I could create content. Why am I not on the other side of things? And every day I just felt like I was completely giving away my creative ideas, churning my own wheels for all these brands that didn't even really care about what I had to say. And I was like, I could have my own creative outlet. So the issue was, though, that the money was so good. I just kept working there. And again, it wasn't a hostile or toxic environment. And so there was no major reason to quit. It was just one day after, I think it was probably about 6 years, I was like, I really feel like I am wasting my creative talents by being in this job and not going all in on whatever I want to do. At that point, I actually didn't even know what it was. I already had my podcast when I had my job, but I didn't know if I wanted to create a vlog or a blog or I don't even know, an Instagram. And I just knew I needed to channel my creativity somewhere. And so it actually was not like a fast and quick decision. It was definitely a slow burn, and I knew I wanted to travel abroad because I had traveled abroad when I was younger. And so that was a part of the equation. Like, I want to travel abroad. I need to figure out what skills I need to travel abroad, and I need an exit plan. But I ended up quitting my job probably a year and a half after I even had the idea to quit my job. So that just goes to show you how enthralled and how invested I was into my work already.
Hmm.
And so it wasn't easy, again, because it was such a fun environment, but I think the wit's end was just realizing there's no end to this. Like, I'm
Hmm.
just going to continue showing up every day, giving away my creative ideas, seeing brands use them, getting no credit, and
Hmm.
just always wishing I was on that content creation side. So yeah, it was a, like I said, a slow burn, but eventually it happened about, I want to say 2 years ago now. Yeah, July 2019 is when I officially left, and now I'm doing my own thing.
Yeah. I mean, you say it and I'm listening to you and it sounds great. But I am sure there were struggles and doubts and fears. How did you push through those?
Oh, 100%. I mean, the biggest fear was money, right? Like I
Hmm.
said, I made good money every other week. So to go from that to not knowing where my next income was going to come from was really scary. And so actually when I got to Australia, that's where I traveled for the first year, I just hopped around for a little bit, had fun. I got my yoga and meditation certification. I was just like doing the eat, pray, love journey. And then it hit me like, Chelsea, you cannot just like live off of this money because you're gonna eventually go broke. And so funny enough, I had left my job to start this whole new journey, and I ended up just taking a bunch of part-time jobs in hospitality. I was working at a gelato shop. I was doing exchange jobs. I was teaching yoga for free on the beach to make connections. And it was just interesting because, again, here I am thinking I'm going to create this whole amazing platform or outlet. But because money was such a big fear, I had to fall back on, other jobs that I needed at that point.
Hmm.
So when you ask, how did I move through it? It wasn't like I was just journaling about money and then it all happened. Like, I really did go back to work and get jobs to pay my rent and pay my bills. And the other piece of that was, oh my God, how am I actually going to do this? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know
Hmm.
what creative outlet I have. I don't really know. Yes, I know marketing, but like, I don't know how to market myself. I don't know how to monetize what I'm even thinking about. And that came with a lot of trial and error. I actually remember a nutritionist and I partnered to do a course where I was going to be like the yoga and meditation instructor, and she was going to do the health and nutrition piece. And we actually met every week. Like, I remember this so vividly. We went to cafes, we were outlining the course, we were shooting videos, but we had never done it before. So we had no idea what we were doing, and absolutely no one signed up. The pandemic started being like talked about.
Hmm.
She had to fly home, and we just like never spoke about it again.
Wow.
So I bring up that story because I don't think there was like a set period of time where I just overcame it. I just knew eventually keep going and something will click, something will pay off. But those doubts and fears came up a lot, especially when I was abroad because I wasn't close to family. I didn't have my support system. I was
Hmm.
making nowhere near as much money as I was in America. And so it was just kind of knowing, okay, keep putting one foot in front of the other and hopefully this clicks. And if not, have fun in Australia and hopefully you can look back and say that at least you had fun.
Yeah, I mean, two things are coming to mind for me. One was a move like this, and a move like this, I mean, up and leaving the job, going to Australia, yoga, meditation. Are those all things that the people that know you would they say, "Oh, that's so Chelsea," or was this like, "Who are you? What are you doing? We love it, but wow."
Yeah, it was a mix of both actually because traveling was always a love of mine. Like, even in corporate America, I always was looking for ways to travel. That's why I loved my job, because I could travel for work. I was
Hmm.
constantly pushing to do meetings in other cities. So I don't think that part was surprising. People were like, okay, yeah, that makes total sense. I think the yoga and meditation probably threw people off because I went to a top party school. I went to Florida State University. I was in Greek life in a sorority. I partied my face off in Florida State. And then in my job, which was a very social job, it was one of those jobs where you take clients to happy hour. You
Hmm.
meet up at lunch and have a drink. And then because I had more money, I just drank more. And so I was partying a lot in my 20s. And only until it probably was like when I was 26 or 27 did I even discover yoga and the power. I guess not discover yoga. I knew that before, but the power of actually like slowing down and
Hmm.
meditation was new to me. So yeah, I think when I left this very high paying job where again I got along with everybody to just go to Bali and get a yoga and meditation
Wow.
certification was actually really a big deal. I remember so many people questioning me. I had people's moms asking me if I was following a boy, was I doing this to
Oh my
find a
goodness.
husband?
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
crazy stuff. I had
Ugh.
multiple people ask that. Are you going to find a husband? Because they couldn't believe that I would leave such a great
Like,
job
what
to,
year are we in here?
right? I know. I was like, did you know you can actually travel and not want to find a husband? Like, what is going on? So yeah, I had a lot of doubts, and that definitely played a huge role. I think that's why I ended up pushing this dream off so much, because so many people's opinions kept getting to me. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, am I doing the wrong thing? Like, why would I leave this job when I could stay and maybe just travel over there for 2 weeks? And yeah, it was not easy, but definitely to answer your question, people would think it's a mix of both.
Okay. It does sound like there was also just a natural level of maturity happening there and just being a little bit more confident and secure in your own decisions and doing your own thing. Would that sound right to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And that definitely came from like years and years of therapy and working on myself and, that whole self development journey. But, I'm not going to lie, like some of those comments did sting,
Yeah.
where I was like, why can't people be happy for me? Why do
Hmm.
they think I'm following a boy? I actually remember one of my friends said, I know that you said that you're going for work, but my mom thinks you're lying and that you're just following a guy. And I'm like,
Holy.
this is crazy. Like I got that comment like 5 times just because I chose to be single for so much of my 20s that people like really couldn't believe that I wouldn't be going to travel just for fun. So, yeah, the
That's such
confidence,
a
I think,
shame. It really
yeah,
is. And I'm
it's
so
tough.
happy that you let it roll. I mean, I know you said it did sting, but it didn't sting enough to stop you. And I think there needs to be more of us out there like that can push through it because those types of comments, I don't know why in 2021 or even a few years ago when you were going through it, I have no idea why they're still happening.
Right. It was insane. And yeah, I think now that you're even asking me that question, the confidence came from weighing the alternates. Like, okay, wait,
Mm,
I can go and just deal with these opinions and know that I'll be happy and find my own way and say, at least I tried it. Or I could say, actually, I'm not going to go to Australia because so and so's mom thinks I'm following a boy. Like, that's so silly to think about
yes.
even entertaining that option. And so, yeah, when I actually logically thought about it, I was like, Chelsea, you have to go.
Yeah.
So,
The
yeah.
perspective, bringing
Mhm.
yourself back to that. You mentioned therapy. Obviously, that is a big passion of mine, I guess, of newer to therapy. But I mean, I don't know what your, I guess maybe I'll just ask you what your experience with that was. What prompted you to get in there? How did it go? Et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So before I even considered therapy, I thought therapy was for people that were like off the ledge, like needed
Same.
medication, were gonna like harm themselves or someone else. So to me, like therapy was never even an option. I was like, I'm not at that level. I don't need that type of support. And it was actually one day after work, and I always tell this story because it comes to me so vividly. Like I was getting off a train in Chicago, walking back to my very nice apartment, and I just started bawling and calling my
Mm.
mom on the sidewalk. And I was like, I don't know how to explain what I'm feeling. I feel miserable. I feel empty. I
Mm-hmm.
feel apathetic. Like I have no motivation, which makes no sense, right? Like everything
Mm-hmm.
on paper checked off. There was nothing on paper that I didn't have. but for some reason I just felt like a shell of myself. I was also, because of how I was feeling, dating really awful guys, making really poor decisions with my social life,
Mm-hmm.
constantly just in a spiral of like low self-esteem despite having a really great, success at work.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the point where I was like, I need to seek help. Like, there's no way I can just feel like this and pretend that it's going to go away on its own. And so I think I just started like Googling therapists in Chicago and like seeing if anybody if there was anybody I could work with. And now that you're asking me this, I just remembered this story where the very first therapist I went to, I did not click with at all. We
Really?
were totally different. Oh my God, not at all. We were totally different ages. She had me, and I'm sure this may have helped some people, but it did not help me. She had me talk to a lamp that I had to pretend was one of the guys I was dating and like express my feelings.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, this is my first time therapy. Like, I did not know this is what we're going to be doing. And I did not vibe with that at all. And so I quickly learned that therapy is like dating and you
Yes.
have to find the right therapist. So I was like, I also realized too, like there was this definite age gap where I was like, I know this sounds superficial and shallow, but I'm like, I'm probably going to bring problems, with Instagram and social media. And I don't think
Mm-hmm.
this woman even knows what I'm talking about when I say DMs and Instagram stories. You know what I mean? So I was
Yes.
like, I need to find a new one. So I found a new one, and she was more of my age. She actually might have been younger than me, which really helped because she did actually have that like millennial perspective that I could share.
Mm-hmm.
And it was cognitive behavioral therapy, which is also known as CBT,
Mm-hmm.
which is really just a lot of reframing and asking like why I would think those things and separating my thoughts from like owning them as my
Mm-hmm.
identity. And that was like cracking the code for me. I was like, wait
Huge.
a second. Yeah, you're telling me my thoughts aren't like facts? You're telling me I can actually like change these? I don't have to live
Yes.
with them. And I went every single week for a whole year, and it was really the biggest impact. The most impactful sessions were the ones where I thought I didn't need to go. And I would email her because I was like, nothing happened this week. Like work is smooth. I'm not even dating anybody. Like things are fine. And she would encourage me to just come in and see if she's like, this is when we can really go below the surface because you're not distracted by a
Mm-hmm.
boy or a work situation or anything. And I noticed those were the sessions where I started to get deeper and deeper and uncover, where do these patterns come from? Why do I think I deserve, such scumbags in the dating world? Why am I like
Mm-hmm.
accepting this? And it was that whole year that I slowly but surely started to again realize that my thoughts weren't facts, and that was a game changer for me.
Yeah. I'm smiling ear to ear right now because I think I have almost the same experience where, it's the same. I'm not bickering with my husband. My kids are fine. I'm whatever. Or sometimes even I'm too busy to even think about what I'm going to talk about. And then I get in there and she hits me with something like, hey, you mentioned this one time 6 months ago. Let's talk about that. And I'm like, why? And I get
Yeah.
2 minutes into it and then I'm bawling. It's like,
Yes. Yes.
oh, this is down in there. It's deep, deep, deep in
Exactly.
there.
Oh my gosh, exactly. And I think what helped too was I had this self-awareness of like, I can't keep dumping all these very heavy emotional issues on my mom or my sisters or
Yes.
my, family members or boyfriend, whoever it was at the time. And I was realizing how like heavy some of this stuff was. And
Mm-hmm.
because I would get it from friends and I'm like, God, this is like a lot to handle. And so
It's
I
like above
realized that
my pay grade here.
yeah, I was like, oh, a therapist I can actually pay to listen to all these problems. So that actually really helped me too. It was like, look, I'm gonna unload because I'm paying you, and this is gonna make me feel better, and it
Hmm.
and it really did.
Yeah, and I think too one of the biggest aha moments for me with therapy is similar to that is that there was nothing more refreshing than completely being able to vent and tell my perspective on something I was going through without any regard for the repercussions of what I was saying. So
Yes.
when I would talk to my mom about my relationships or whatever, I was always mindful of, well, keep maybe some things close to the chest because you know you're going to get over it, but then she's going to hold that opinion of this person forever. And I might go through something with a friend and I'd be telling my husband and then I'd expect him 2 hours later to sit at a dinner table with them, and he's
Right.
looking at me like, weren't you just upset with this person? I'm like, yeah, but I'm fine now. And so it was
Yeah,
so
exactly.
nice to just talk to someone and say every little thing that crosses your mind, but that you might normally hold back with someone that you know or that knows the person you're talking about, and actually say the ugly truth, just get it
Oh
all out.
yeah, 100%. I remember there were times where even there were some things like I was up to no good at certain periods in my 20s, and there were certain things that I was like, I feel like my therapist is going to judge me. Like
Yes.
even though I'm paying for her, and I would tell her, I was like, look, I feel like I've been holding some things back that
Mm,
I truly feel like you're going to judge me. And
mm-hmm.
even being able to say that was a huge relief. And of course, we talked through it, but it was very interesting, like you said, to notice that and notice, yeah, I can't just like talk crap about someone and then 2 hours later we're like best friends at happy hour. Like people are
Right.
gonna be like, wait, what?
Yeah, and I find too, especially with that, when you dig a little deeper, sometimes what might come up for me has to do with a person, but it has to do with us 10 years ago. So,
Yes.
it's not relevant to anyone else but me, you know.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And again, like my friends and my sister, my mom, I love them, but they're not like trained psychologists.
Right.
So and they're always going to take your side, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
even if you mess up, they're going to
Right.
be like, "Well, maybe it was their fault, maybe it
Right.
wasn't yours." And I'm
Right.
like, "No, sometimes it actually is my fault and I need to examine myself and see what's
Yes.
going on under the surface."
Yeah. And that is reminding me too of something that I heard you say in one of your shows, I think it was, or maybe it was on your Instagram, I can't recall. But in with the clients that you work with, that sometimes you're so moved by what they're going through that you're brought to tears. I mean, tell me a little bit about what you do, and the clients you work with, and how those emotional journeys that you're working with people on can affect you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I started my business last year and it was originally mindset coaching. It's expanded more now to mindset and business and podcast coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So I do a few different things and I always like to experiment, but it really is the basis is mindset. And what's interesting is we're having this conversation about therapy. And I think it's worth bringing up that when I started mindset coaching, people were like, "Oh my God, so you're like a therapist, or you're like my therapist now." And I'm like, oh my gosh, no, no, no. And I
Yeah.
actually ended up taking a course on how this is not therapy and how to explain it because I
Wow.
did notice some of the questions that were coming up to me. I was like, I'm not a qualified psychologist. Like, these are not issues I can help you with. And what I learned, and I think it's worth sharing here, is that mindset coaching or coaching in general
Mm-hmm.
is like setting a forward thinking goal. So like I want
Mm,
to, I don't know, leave my job in 6 months. Okay, well let's make an exit plan. What are like
mm,
baby steps we can take to get there? Let's talk about your finances. What blocks are you having when it comes to that exit plan? Versus therapy is like let's go back
right.
and really visit those wounds from maybe even childhood that are appearing as patterns, and who do you need to forgive in your
Mm-hmm.
past? And a big thing I learned was if something is like debilitating, let's say you have anxiety attacks and you can't go to work, or you're drinking too much and you can't make it into work every day, something that is actually affecting your day-to-day life and your relationships, that would be where a therapist would come in. Where again, mindset coaching is like more forward thinking and setting goals.
That's so great. You
So,
just said, I'm so glad you clarified that. And I didn't even
yeah.
realize that's pretty amazing that there's a course on that.
Oh yeah, it was an amazing course with this woman named Topsy Vandenbosch. She's awesome. It's called
Oh, I've
Destroy the
seen
Mindset
her.
Drama. Yeah, it
Because
was an
she actually
incredible
is a
course.
therapist, isn't she?
Yes, she was a therapist turned mindset coach. So she was like the
Wow.
perfect person to lead this course. And I learned because, again, like my first few clients, they were coming to me with some pretty heavy things that
Yeah.
I was like, I thought we were going to be talking about, I
Goals.
don't even know. Yeah,
Give
goals
me
and
your
like
business plan.
developing, yeah, healthy habits and morning routines, not like what happened in the past when you were 12. And I had to start just making that disclaimer in my applications, in
Mm,
my work. But to what you were asking of like the things they're coming with, that still comes up, right? Like
right.
there is kind of an intersection where forward thinking requires you to reflect back on like
Mm-hmm.
what is preventing you from moving forward. And I think as being someone who is sensitive and empathetic and like, I don't know, I'm the oldest of four kids. And so I feel like I always kind of had to be this role model or someone that they can look up to, that when I have that dynamic with my clients and I hear some of these things that they've gone through or they're moving through, it really does bring me to tears sometimes because I'm like, wow, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I'm so blessed and fortunate. And to be honest, sometimes it makes me feel guilty of like, why did I get it so easy and my clients didn't, or how are we going to move through this because I haven't helped them. And it's something that, again, I've done a lot of reflection on, done a lot of education and coaching on now. And I think what comes up too when those tears happen is, I know it sounds a bit crazy, but I think it's also like a spiritual thing where I feel
Mm-hmm.
like sometimes I start crying and I have to tell them something. And this has happened like two or three different times now where I'm like, hold on, I'm getting emotional. I just need to tell you something. And someone will be like, that's what my dad used to say. And he passed away a few years ago. And he used to say those exact same words. And I'm like,
Wow.
wow, this is pretty crazy. So now I feel like when I start getting emotional, to trust it and not just be like, oh, this is so sad. It's like, maybe this is coming up for a reason and I can see what message needs to come through and just share what's on my heart and see if it's helpful.
That is so cool, actually. I mean, to be that connected and that in tune to yourself, the universe. I mean, that's how I would refer to it. I'm sure you have much
Yeah.
more eloquent words to put to it, but
Oh, and I call it that too.
I mean, that's incredible. Is that as incredible for you as it sounds to me?
Yeah, it was. And I honestly didn't realize probably until the last 3 months that this might actually be like a clairvoyant or clairsentient or
Huh.
even like a psychic gift because I took a spiritual development course last fall. And I remember going into it thinking like, we're going to learn, I don't even know, like fun ways to look at numbers and colors. I don't know what I was thinking. And like the first day, she was like, okay, we're going to do like a health reading on this photo. I need you to tap into your senses and I need you to try and like sense what health issues this person has. I was like, what?
What?
What are we doing right now? And then we would do like readings on each other and we were learning so much in that course. And I kept telling the mentor, I feel like I am making things up. Like it feels like I'm using my imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And she kept reassuring me, like, of course it's going to feel like that because the human analytical side of you is like, this isn't real, this isn't happening. And what was interesting though was throughout that whole course there were things that kept happening that were like a little too spot on to pretend that it was just my imagination.
Wow.
And I'll just give a quick example. We did this telepathy, I always say that word wrong.
Telepathy.
Telepathic. Yeah, I'm like, telepathy,
I
I think
just
that's
tried
it.
to say it and was immediately
Yeah,
stopped.
it's a hard word.
It
I'm like, I
is.
always get it wrong, but we did an exercise like that. And she was like, I'm just thinking of a movie from the 21st century. I'm going to think about it for 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, like, what am I supposed to do with this information?
Right.
And I just started writing anything I could think of, anything that was like coming to me visually. And then all of a sudden, I got this like vision of the fields and sound of music. And I was like, that's weird. I'll just write it down. Who cares? But then I had this urge to circle it, and I was like, okay, whatever. Kept writing. I was writing like the Wild Wild West,
Mm-hmm.
writing really anything. Again, thinking I'm making things up. We end the exercise, and she says the movie I'm thinking about was Sound of Music, and I'm like,
Wow.
what?
You fell off your
So
chair.
really, no, really, I like screamed when she said it. I was like, what? Because I was, again, thinking I'm making things up with my imagination. And so she kept reassuring me, like, Chelsea, it's going to feel like you're making things up. But I kept
Mhm.
thinking too, like, aren't some of these things common sense? Like, we would do exercises, and I'm like, couldn't you just be, I know this sounds maybe a little like cocky, but I'm like, couldn't you just be very smart and figure some of these things out with like intelligence? And she's
Mm.
like, again, that is like you thinking that
Mm.
you're like discrediting these gifts.
Mhm.
So the reason I say all that is because I kind of like like that course was helpful, but it to me, I wasn't like, oh, I'm ready to like start practicing psychic readings and, bring this into my work. And it
Mhm.
wasn't until those very specific instances, again, two or three times where someone's loved one had passed away. And I started crying and telling them a message that they
Wow.
would tell me, my person used to say this, that I started tying that course into I was like, wow, maybe that course actually did help me. And it's not something I actively I'm like, "Woo, come and get a reading with me," or anything like that, but
Mhm.
it is something that pops up here and there, and so I do tell my clients like, "Hey, I do layer spirituality into my work. There might be some things that come up that I don't even realize are coming up, and I might share them with you if I feel like they're gonna help you." But yeah, it was pretty cool to hear someone receive that message and be like, "Wow, I needed that confirmation or validation today."
That's amazing. I mean, are you able to then come away from that interaction? okay, or are you like are you affected? I'm just imagining delivering a message to someone from their loved one, and then I'm wondering, I guess, does it trigger for you
Mm.
anything with loved ones who have passed or anything? Like, how do you? I don't know. I don't know what that feels like, so I don't really know.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think to answer the one about triggering, no, because I do feel like I've had a really solid childhood and adult life comes to like people passing away. Like there's no my
Hmm.
grandparents have passed away, but like I
Hmm.
have had no immediate deaths. I haven't lost friends. Like
Mm.
there like grief isn't something that I'm super familiar with actually until last year when my grandpa passed. And even then I have a whole story about that, which I can tell another day, but it wasn't until it was like okay, he was old, I knew he was going to pass away, right?
Right.
So sometimes the things they're saying I absolutely empathize, but it doesn't trigger me. And I will say I've had to develop a really strong practice around like opening up that energy and closing it. So
Interesting.
literally sometimes when I get off calls, I'm not kidding, I will like hit exit on Zoom and like close my laptop and go walk around the block, or
Yeah.
like go make food or go cuddle
Create
with my
space.
boyfriend. Exactly. I'm like, I'm not gonna just like sit on my laptop and think about that. It
Hmm.
really is this like closing of the energy and opening it too. Like sometimes I will take a deep breath before hopping on the Zoom call or spray some lavender spray just to like clear my senses. But
Hmm.
um it's a practice. Like I used to book myself back to back thinking like, woo, I'll just fit all these clients in and book my schedule up and make more money. And I'm like, that's impossible. Like
Mm.
these calls are way too much energy and way too many sensitivities happening to just pretend like I can move from call to call. I absolutely need that space to close down and reset.
Yeah, you gotta set a boundary for yourself and just keep
Hmm.
yourself sane and healthy.
Absolutely.
So I also, um, I guess, well, I'm thinking of, I grew up in a house where, my mom talked to me a lot about the universe. She believed that everything works out for a reason. I kind of go about my life with this innate just sense of things work out for me. I don't know how, I don't always know when and where, but they're going to. And so I'm bringing it up because within my close knit family, it's very normal for us to just talk this way and believe that things are connected, experiences are connected, this and that, but that's not always the case. I've run in, as I'm sure you know, I've come into conflict with, not quite conflict, but debate with friends, colleagues, who don't operate this way. Your ability to tap into this world or the manifestation, the spirituality, did that come from childhood or did you, I guess, discover that in your travels and later in life?
It definitely came later in life.
Okay.
My mom grew up Catholic, went to an all girls Catholic school, Catholic college. My
Got it.
dad, yeah, my dad
Understand. Yeah.
Yeah, my dad grew up like kind of just going to, the Christian holiday church sessions like Easter and Christmas Eve and
Hmm.
Thanksgiving. But when I was born and when my other siblings came, I don't remember them ever like pushing anything on us, being like, "Hey, you have to be Catholic," or "We're going to go to this church." It was kind of just like the things you are societally expected to do, like okay,
Right.
we should go to church on Christmas, we should maybe go to church on Easter, and that's what we did. But I don't remember ever feeling like tapped into spirituality or anything. And actually growing up I had a lot of friends that were very very Christian, which was totally fine, but we ended up going to youth camps or youth groups,
Hmm.
and the language there was very extreme, like if
Yeah.
you don't accept Jesus you're going to hell.
Oh my
Harry
goodness.
Potter is witchcraft. All these things
I
that just
love
made
Harry
me,
Potter.
oh my God, I loved Harry Potter. And my grandma kept buying me the books. And after I went to that youth camp, I stopped reading them. And like
No.
to this day, that is like one of my biggest regrets, that she bought me all the books and I stopped reading after like the third one
Oh.
because of that youth camp. And I'm like, I need to go back and read
Yeah,
them.
it's
So
not too late. They're
yeah.
still so well written.
Exactly. I'm like, that's on the bucket list. So, yeah, that was kind of my experience with like spirituality and religion, was like very extreme. And so it wasn't until probably to be honest, the whole therapy journey that opened up that world of
Hmm.
journaling and slowing down and meditation, and that's when it really started to come out.
Yeah. Well, I have to, the other statement that's coming to my mind is just, it takes a lot of balls. It does. I mean, I feel like we're just met with so much doubt, I think, and as much more common as it is to see public figures sort of diving into this world. Gabby Bernstein's coming to mind.
Hmm.
It's still met with some resistance. I mean, is that are you finding that? Are you having negative experiences either on social media or with the people you encounter?
That's a good question. I haven't had a negative experience where someone's messaged me and been like, "This is, total BS. I don't believe this. What are you doing?" Because the way I see it, I'm like, we're all actually talking about the same thing, just using different language.
Oh,
And
I
I
love
have had
that.
people, yeah, I've had people join my courses who are extremely religious, who go to church every Sunday, read the Bible. And I just say, when I reference the universe or, whatever I call it,
Mm-hmm.
in your language, just replace it with God. You could also replace it with whatever language feels good to you. And then it starts to click like, oh, wow, we actually are all talking about the same thing, just in
Yeah.
different like versions of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't had much resistance, but I will say what felt really off to me or weird was when I did start talking about it. I was really holding on to that whole college party girl identity from my early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
So it felt I almost felt like I was being fake in a way because I was like, oh, this
Mm.
isn't who I really am. Like, I'm the girl that goes to happy hour and gets super drunk and makes bad decisions. So to all of a sudden move to Australia and get my yoga and meditation certification and start talking about manifestation and spirituality, I was always thinking in the back of my head, I can just picture coworkers or friends like looking at my content being like, what is she doing? Like, what is
Yeah.
she talking about? We've never seen her talk about this. But those were all assumptions and insecurities because what's interesting is like half of my old coworkers have now taken my courses or work
Huh.
with me one on one or message me about my podcast. And I'm like, wow, I really was making up all these negative
Yeah.
assumptions when in reality, it's like, I wish that people would do the same because it's like they were probably waiting for someone to speak up about it. So I did it and they were like, finally. So
Mm-hmm.
imagine if other people spoke up, what that would do too. So yeah.
Yeah. I was going to ask you why maybe you were holding on to that identity or those opinions. And as you're talking, I think that's one other thing that's been really beneficial for me about therapy is realizing how much of what I think is going on out there for other people is really just going on in my own head.
Oh, 100%. That's what I was like. I need to talk to my therapist again. Like, is she on speed dial in Australia? Because I'm having all these thoughts again. It was interesting. I actually did email her when I was in Australia, and she's like, I can't talk to clients unless they're in Chicago. So,
Oh.
um, that didn't work out. But yeah, it was. I'm also thinking now too. When you're asking about the negative question, it wasn't negativity, as more of just like questioning.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I actually remember my brother being like, I don't get it. Like, what are you talking about? I don't even know what to tell my friends that you do. This makes no sense to me. And it wasn't until like I started doing really well in my business that they were like, okay, like maybe this is something.
Right.
And so I always tell my clients, I'm like, you always seem crazy or delusional or it seems impossible until you get to the other side. And then people are like, oh, you weren't actually crazy. This is a real thing. This,
Mm-hmm.
like, you weren't making it up. Um, so yeah, I don't remember if you were talking about the question of therapy.
I
Somehow I
was
just went off topic.
No, 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 you didn't at all. I was just sharing that, um, therapy has helped me understand how much of what I think other people are thinking is really what I'm actually thinking about myself, and having
Oh,
to
right.
like rework that and and deal with that.
Exactly. Like, I had to use those practices again, the same practices that I was telling my clients. I was like, okay, I'm making up all these stories in my head
Mm-hmm.
that my coworkers are making fun of
Yeah.
me, that my old boss is making fun of me,
Mm-hmm.
when then I had to look at the evidence. And I tell my clients to do this too, like, find the evidence, like, is that true? Has anyone actually reached
Yes.
out to me and been like,
Right.
your work makes no sense, it
Right.
sucks, stop talking? I'm like, that has never happened. If anything, it's always the opposite. Like, thanks for your podcast, or I'm interested in your course. And I had to use that and stop making up all these scenarios in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, going back to what I said earlier, I'm like, what's the alternate that I'm going to let
Yeah.
Like, let's say an old coworker did say something mean. Okay, so I'm just gonna like shut down my business and stop talking about it
Right.
because like
Right.
Sally from marketing said
It's
something. Like, that's
ridiculous. Yes,
crazy.
exactly. Yeah. You've also said, I've heard you say several times that in order to make space for the new and the right people in your life and in your tribe and in your world, that it does sometimes require letting go of others. And
Yeah.
perhaps maybe some of the people that, yeah, maybe some old coworker would make fun of you or would whatever, but to your point of just looking at the perspective on it, it's like, okay, you know what? Well, then you can get out of the way because there's someone else. I need you to make room for someone else to come in.
Exactly. And even the word like letting go, I will be honest, like I'm not someone that has actually had direct conversations with people and said like if you don't like what I'm doing, you can unfollow or
Right.
you don't need to subscribe or anything like that because I just trust that the people that are meant to see this content or this message will see it and be
Yeah.
attracted to it and people that aren't will naturally fall away just like anything, right?
Yes.
Like I'm not even interested in the same stuff I was 5 years ago, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure I've naturally gravitated away from that and into something else. And so I believe that's happening when I'm speaking kind of in terms of like social media or my
Yeah.
podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But in my personal life, you do kind of see like my mom always says this analogy and I love it. It's like friendship levels in your inner circle are kind of like a bookshelf and the books just like change what shelves they're on. Like
Hmm.
some books will be right in front of you and you're like ready to talk to them and they're all they're your classic favorites and then some of them like move and they go to the bottom shelf and you're like, I'm not getting rid of you out of my library. It's just like we're not on the same
I
page
love
anymore.
that.
Yeah. And so I'm like, yeah, some of my friendships have changed. Like I
Mm-hmm.
went home a few months ago and that was wild. I was like,
I'm
wow,
sure.
I feel it's like culture shock. Like, when I left, again, I was like this party girl working in Chicago, making a lot of money. And now I come back having my own business, talking about manifestation, spirituality, coaching. These are not things that we
Right.
grew up learning about in my
Right.
little town in Florida. So it was a huge shock to the system.
Yeah, I'm finding that too, even now a little bit with the pandemic. I think this year, I'll just speak for myself, I've changed a lot throughout this experience, being quarantined and having a kid in the middle of it, and just I've changed a lot. And I think that's something I've been a little bit aware of as life starts to open back up again, is that the type of person I am and the type of friend that I might be is going to look different at the table beforehand. And I think we just, I don't know, I think that's okay. And that's really what I think a lot of what you're saying is if you're okay with yourself and who you are, it's a lot more peaceful, and those friendships are always going to be there, but it might just look different.
Absolutely. And it's so funny you say that because recently I was thinking about what podcast episode I want to do next. And it was literally how quarantine changed me because
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly how I feel. Like
Mm-hmm.
I just ate gluten-free pasta with broccoli and tomatoes earlier. That is not what I was eating a year ago. I was eating like cheeseburgers,
Yeah.
kebabs, ice
Right.
cream. So I'm like, quarantine has changed my health, my social patterns, like
Yeah.
everything. And I think people would be lying if they said like nothing's changed in the
Mm-hmm.
last year because our social behavior changed, our inner circles changed. We all decided to either like learn something new or switch careers or just take a
Mm-hmm.
big step back in what we really wanted. And so a lot of people have changed. And to your point, maybe the friendship levels change, but what I'm learning is like that doesn't mean you need to cut them off. Like
Right.
I don't need to just stop being friends with my friends from home. It's just obviously we're probably going to have a few different conversations. Like I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to be talking to them about astrology and spirituality and
Right.
human design and all these things because they would think I've like lost my mind. But I'm like I don't need to make that wrong. Like I can still have that piece of my life that is in my work and I don't think you need to separate work and your personal life. But what I mean is like I can find common ground with them still. I don't need to
Yes.
act like all of a sudden we lost connection, but it is a lot different now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I want to then, I don't know if this really segues at all, but I want to make sure that I really talk to you about this because I am a person who's had manifestation, meditation on my sort of mental to-do list for years. And I realize the more I listen to you, your podcast, and some of your colleagues, that I do some of it sort of just innately, but I absolutely love how relatable and approachable you speak about what you do and spirituality and manifestation. And I would love for you to just take some time, if you wouldn't mind, talk to someone who really hasn't made it a formal practice in her life yet but wants to and just feels like about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, this is my favorite topic of what you just said, like realizing that you were innately doing it. This is like the point I've been trying to make lately on the past month or two on my social media is
Hmm.
it's not even like it does not have to be a morning routine or practice that you like stop your day for and start being
Okay,
like,
good.
okay, I need to start manifesting. Yeah, no, it's
because
like you're
because
already
it's so
doing it.
defeating, you know? You're like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and then guess what? Like one of my kids doesn't sleep through the night, or they wake up an hour earlier. No matter what, every time I set my alarm for earlier, the kid wakes up at that time, and I'm like, this is the time I'm supposed to be manifesting my dreams and all of this, and I'm like, then I'm so
Oh,
defeated, you know?
this is like exactly what I mean though. This is I've been calling it like type B manifestation where I'm
I've
like it's
heard
kind of
that
like
you say that, yeah.
lazy. Yeah, I'm like because it's not this whole idea that you have to like set aside an hour in the morning, journal, do your vision board. Like
Hmm.
those things are absolutely helpful and I'll talk about them in a second, but this whole idea that you have to start separating manifesting your dreams from like day-to-day life, to me I like don't buy that at all. And that's the message I'm trying to get out right now is
Hmm.
like you are manifesting all the time. So to talk about what you were asking, I want everybody to like stop for a second and go Google the word manifestation. It literally means to bring something from your mind's eye into reality. So
Mm.
once you take it off this pedestal of like it's
Oh,
this magical out of body floating in the air experience, you realize I'm literally manifesting every day.
yeah.
Anybody that's listening to this podcast that's like alive right now is manifesting. For example, you and me having this podcast interview. You had the thought, I want to interview Chelsea. You
Yeah.
took action to email me and now we're here having this interview. You manifested this interview.
Hmm.
So you can, when you start to realize, okay, wow, I manifested this interview. I can manifest doing my laundry, right? I'm thinking about doing laundry. I do the laundry and it's done. You just manifested laundry. So when you think about how simple it is, you're like, oh, okay, that's what the word means. You start to realize this is not a daily practice, right? Like you don't practice
Can I
like
manifest my husband doing the laundry?
yes, visualize, vision board.
He looks so good. Taking that stuff from the washer to the dryer. I'm picturing it now.
Yes. I was like, yeah, that's the way to go. Because to your point, I'm like, again, people have just made it this big, big thing. And
Yeah.
even when I heard the word, I was like, oh my gosh, this is something that you have to like actively, plug into your daily routine and make
Hmm.
sure that you're carving out very specific periods of time. And now that I don't even like to say been doing it because I'm like, again, we've all been manifesting our whole lives. I
Mm.
think what's happened in the last few years, we've just been more conscious about what that word means.
Hmm.
And now there's a whole industry around it of like, okay, here's how to manifest. So, of course, it sounds like a new sport or a new hobby that you have to
Yeah.
try, but it really isn't. Like, that's why I highly encourage people to always check out the definition. I'm like, if you have a thought and you take action and it is appearing in your life, that is a manifestation.
Hmm. I love that. Yeah, because it sounds, and I have a hard time with it because, like I said, I grew up in a house where if I looked at my mom and I was like, I want to manifest, she'd be like, yeah, sit down, let's do it. It wasn't like it was very open in that way, but still to me, it feels intimidating. I think where you said, the industry, where it's become this industry where there are these big, like, guru type people, when you listen to some people talk, and I'm honestly not even thinking of anyone specific, but I've heard some talks and where I've kind of like tapped my toe in a little bit. It's like within the first few minutes, they're saying words that I don't understand. I mean, and to quote you, I actually quoted this because it hit it right on the head. You said one time, like, how do I show up or surrender to a thought or to a feeling or just to my mind if I have to go to work, go to yoga, have drinks with friends, and do a podcast? Like, where in my
Right.
life do I just sit down and surrender, you know? And
Oh
I
my
think
God.
that's
Yeah.
where it can be really intimidating, is that it can be, you kind of like feel silly sometimes, maybe asking someone who has experience that exact question. It seems almost like you might be insulting them or that you don't know what you're talking about. And then I think it just stops people from taking that next step.
Oh, absolutely. And again, that has become my biggest issue with how it's being marketed lately, is like this gate kept information of like,
Mm,
you're only going to learn if you sign up for this XYZ thing, and if you don't know how to do these things, then I'm not sure how you're going to manifest. When I'm like, it's almost, here's how I would phrase it. It's almost the same thing as being like, if you don't know how to breathe, you need to come to my course and learn how to breathe. It's like you're always manifesting.
yeah.
So this idea that all of a sudden it's like this secret society of people that know how to do it and don't know how to do it, I'm like, I think it's total BS. Like, it actually really upsets me that it's become like that.
Yeah.
I think when I started to teach it from a lens of like self-development, because I realized when I would go on podcasts and people would ask me about manifestation or something, I was like, wait, I don't have like a framework. Like, even if you ask me right now, how do you manifest? I'm like, I don't have a specific set of steps. It's like I kind of just think about something and I
Mm-hmm.
visualize it over and over in my head, and I
Mm-hmm.
believe that it will happen, and it will happen. Sometimes I will do that and try to, vision board or journal
Right.
about it, or understand, like, I guess an example would be my business, right? I thought about it for so long, and
Mm-hmm.
there were a lot of things that were holding me back. Like I said, I didn't know how to market, I didn't know how to monetize myself. So, of course, I had to observe those beliefs and learn about them. Like, why don't I feel like I can charge that much? Or why don't I feel like I can market myself? But that didn't mean that I like couldn't manifest it just
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't know those things. And I think right now, I think that a big issue with manifestation is being marketed as like extreme wealth. Like, I
Mm.
see a lot of people's vision boards, and no hating if this is on your vision board, but this is a common vision board I see. It's a G Wagon, a mansion, a Thailand vacation, a watch, and, designer bag. And I'm like, that is absolutely, I have no issues with any of those things. What I have an issue with is people making that seem like, if you are not getting all these things in your life, then you're not manifesting. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Like I just said, you can manifest doing laundry. We
Mm.
manifested this podcast interview. You can manifest having a good night's sleep. So, this idea that your vision board or whatever you're trying to manifest has to be a symbol of luxury or wealth or anything like that, or material, is actually false, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. So what are some things that are on your vision board, or that you encourage your clients to really step outside of that and put on there, or to think about?
Absolutely. I think the vision board, and the reason I love them is because there is something to be said about when you see something every day, right? Like, there
Mm-hmm.
is something in your brain that will try to seek out that experience or that feeling. So when I make vision boards, it's actually more about the feeling versus that thing coming to me. So that's why I don't love the idea of just putting like material items on there, because a lot of times that's fleeting. And I know that from personal experience. Like I said, making a lot
Right.
of money in Chicago, I kept thinking, oh, if I just got the bag, I'd be happy. If I got the nice couch, I'd be happy. If I could fly private, I'd be happy. And it's like none of that ever clicked. It just never made me happy.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I'm not saying money is like the root of all evil or it doesn't buy happiness. I think money is amazing and an amplifier.
Mm-hmm.
But back to the vision boards, I right now encourage my clients to focus on what feeling is coming from whatever image or vision that they're putting on there.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I had a client that she wanted to volunteer. So she put like dog walking on there. She put a beautiful garden because she wanted to like eat fresh food. She put a
Mm-hmm.
picture of someone doing Pilates because she wanted to try that. And it was like the feelings, though, weren't just, oh, I'm going to sign up for a Pilates studio and start dog walking. It was like, I'm going to feel joy giving back to my community and connecting with animals and their
Mm-hmm.
pure nature. I'm going to feel strong in my body when I do Pilates and feel more connected to myself. Again, not just like, oh, I'm going to have a hot body and be a good person or something. I think
Yeah.
that's where we go wrong.
Yeah.
And so that's what I encourage my clients to do, is like focus on the feeling and like truly think about your dream and what that would visually look like, And for me right now, it's funny you asked this because I just changed it like a week ago.
Hmm.
It is all travel destinations because I have been like
I
locked up
know.
in
Ugh.
Germany.
Oh my
So
God.
it's all, oh my God, I have like 9 squares on my phone background. And it's like Paris, Amsterdam,
Hmm.
Thailand, like all these places. And I might not go to all 9 of those places, that's not the goal. It's just to bring me that feeling of, like, freedom, relaxation, resting,
Hmm.
rejuvenation, and, like, that's a feeling that I would like to accomplish in the next few months.
Yeah, I'm highly critiquing my vision board right now. But
Oh,
I'm
no, don't critique it.
no, 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 but only because I really I like what you're saying. I really I do have, if I'm being honest, a lot of those material type things on there, but really what I'm coming to clarity on as you're talking is it's really just the feeling of freedom of if I want it, I can get it, and if I don't, it's my
Yes,
choice. It's
exactly.
that more feeling of control and choice rather than really what it is that I'm looking at on this board. So that's interesting to me. And I actually, going off of that, I was listening to a few of your shows. Actually, I think you saw it. I was listening to one of your shows while I was cleaning up the floor in my living room. And as I was doing that, I'm thinking to myself, God, I just really wish I had a housekeeper that would like take off so much, and I was like all in my feelings about it, and I was all like meh about it. And as I'm doing that, I'm going, no, Christy, shift this. Start thinking about how nice it will feel and how lovely it will be for you to walk into a clean room and a clean house that you did not have to spend 6 hours a day doing. Start thinking about how it will feel to you. You'll feel like you have more time, and you'll feel like you can breathe, and that you'll have more energy to be with your kids and put towards your work because you aren't having to clean toilets. So I thank you for that, because it really was a shift. I went from where to no. Let's start feeling the feeling of what having a little bit more help around the house would feel like.
Exactly. And even like you said, if someone's listening right now and their vision board is full of those things that I mentioned, the G-Wagon, the purse, Thailand, it's not that that's a bad thing at all. Like, again, I think those things are beautiful, but like we're talking about the feeling. What are you going to
Yeah.
feel like when you get the purse? What is it going to feel like when you have the
Yeah,
G-Wagon?
because the
And if
feeling
it's
is what sticks, right? Like
exactly.
the feeling is what you can, as you're just driving to work or whatever, the feeling is what you can really tap into.
Mhm. Exactly. And then what's interesting is sometimes that feeling comes up in a way you didn't realize, and you're like,
Mm,
"Oh, I'm actually feeling that sense of joy or peace or whatever just by hanging out with my dog or
mm-hmm.
walking around in the morning." Yeah, maybe I didn't need to go all the way to
Yeah.
Thailand to feel that.
Yeah.
And it's actually really exciting when you realize like what's right in front of you really
Oh,
can
I
bring you those
love
same
that.
feelings.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, oh my goodness, that's such a good point. That's such a good point. And I think it's really relevant for this year too, right? Because people are kind of taking that time, maybe not so much now, we're coming out of it a little bit, but that's slowing down and just
Mhm.
realizing where you might, like you just said, be finding joy that you wouldn't have realized before.
Exactly. We were so distracted before the pandemic, right? Like
Hmm.
always socializing on our phones, doing whatever. And I think, like you said, it caused us to reflect and be like, wow, I'm actually really solid with the relationships I have. And even if you're not, reflecting on like how you could make them better or nurture them. I think that was a big thing for me. It was like, okay, now I'm forced to slow down.
Hmm.
It's time to actually really look at what I want out of my life and what's already in front of me that I can appreciate.
Hmm. Hmm. So other than so we talked about vision board, you mentioned journaling. Are there any other kind of like just maybe quick tips or something that you start people off with that you can share?
Yeah, I really love the power of like a visualization meditation. And I feel like when I say the word meditation, people automatically think, again, like floating out of your body,
Yeah.
not thinking anything, your mind stops. I'm like, your mind literally cannot stop thinking. Like it is
Hmm.
built for thinking. So sometimes I don't even say meditation, I'll just say visualization.
Okay.
But I think there's so much power in using your imagination and the visuals or experiences you have had in your life. So, for example, I'll use a very specific example right now. my visa. I've been talking about this on my podcast,
Mm-hmm.
but my German visa is not something that I can guarantee I know I will get. There's no guarantee. Like, that's why it has to be reviewed. It could be a yes or a no. But what I'm visualizing right now is getting that email from the government saying your visa has been approved. I'm visualizing the
Mm-hmm.
dinner that my boyfriend and I will have when we celebrate and getting a bottle of wine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm visualizing calling my family and us like freaking out on WhatsApp that I got the visa.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the reason I do that, and I suggest my clients do that, is you're actually training your nervous system for that to happen before it even happens so you don't sabotage it. And this happens a lot where we think we want something and we want it quickly and it happens. And because we weren't prepared for it, we completely sabotage it or throw it away in the trash. And then we're like, oh my God, I can't handle it. I'm not deserving. And then we just like shut down. So all these things sound like, oh, cool, fun tools. Yeah, let me try it. But there's actually a lot of logic and reasoning behind it is to train your thoughts and your nervous system and your belief system to be fully convinced that these things are happening, because then it will be a lot easier to integrate them into your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it does go back to earlier in our conversation where you were saying how you had to unpack why you feel a certain way about yourself, or why you think you're not deserving or this or that of charging clients, and all the examples that you brought up. And it does touch on that, because if you're thinking about it happening and you're expecting it happening, when it does, you're like, oh yeah, of course, I know that was going to
Right.
happen. You're not like,
Exactly.
whoa. You're like, what do
Exactly.
I
It's
do with
like
this now? Yeah, yeah,
100%. It's like
yeah.
the way I think about it is like it almost has to feel like a 100% truth. Maybe not 100%, but like almost like this. If someone said your skin is blue, you'd be like, no, it's not. Like, what are you talking about? My skin is
Mm,
not blue. And it would be such a silly thought. That's almost the same exact feeling you want to have for like your whatever goals you have. And here's the thing, I don't even like saying your manifestations, because that makes it again seem like it's this far away prize or thing that you can't
mm-hmm,
attain. So
mm-hmm.
it's more of like your visions. So like again with my visa, it's my vision to have that visa. And
Mm-hmm.
so I need to like be fully convinced in my body, like, of course it's happening. Like,
Yeah.
of course I'm going to get the email
Mm-hmm.
from the government. Why wouldn't I? And I'm applying that same feeling and belief to anything you want is really, really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I really like that. Do you have any advice? So I'm also thinking now. I'm actually thinking about what maybe some people in my life would say, because I tend to talk like that, like, oh, it's just gonna happen, it's just gonna happen, and they're like, are you prepared for if it doesn't? Are
Mm.
you okay with that? I mean, what do you think about that? What do you say about that? Because I tend
Oh,
to
yeah.
sit all in the positive. I tend to sit, I gotta just think it does, think it is, it's already happened, but I don't know. I do find that I am prepared for both in some way, even though I might just be visualizing the positive outcome. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, 100%. I am someone that like I do not encourage people to live in like light and love, high vibe, positive vibes only land, because I'm like that's not the world we live in. Like in
Mm-hmm.
case no one saw, we're still in a
Right.
global pandemic.
Right.
We're still very much experiencing a lot of darkness in the world. So to pretend that we're like living in rainbow land is not a real thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so I actually tell my clients to walk through the worst case scenario so that they're prepared for that. And I know
Okay.
that sounds crazy
No,
because
it's
it's
yeah,
like,
it's
wait,
smart.
aren't you, yeah, a
Yeah.
positive mindset coach and helping people? But for example, I'll use my visa again because we've been talking about it. I have actually considered what happens if I don't get this visa? Well, I actually asked the agency, what happens if I don't get it? Well, you don't immediately get kicked out of the country. You can appeal it, you can resubmit a new visa application. You
Mm-hmm.
have like 90 days to even figure it out. So I'm like, okay, already I'm calming myself down because my thought, we immediately go to like catastrophe, right?
Yeah.
My thought is like, I'm not going to get the visa and they're going to tell me like that night I have to fly home to America, where it's
Right.
like, that's not
Right.
absolute,
Right.
that's not true at
Right.
all. So
Right.
when I walk through the worst case scenarios, I'm like, okay, those aren't that bad. And then let's say I did have to fly home to America. I only have to go home for 3 months and then I can come back on a tourist visa. So it's actually not that bad. Is it the ideal scenario? No, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not that bad. And I actually walk through then what could I shift that around to? Like if I have to go home, great. I can catch up with all my friends from home. I can spend time with family. I
Right.
can go to the beach, right? Like there's
Hmm.
so many other things I can do. And so when my clients start to get in, I call it like the what if spiral, like what if this happens and what if this and what if this? I'm like, okay, calm down. And yeah, what if it happens? Because it
Right.
actually might happen. What are you going to do? Walk through that whole scenario beginning to end. And
Hmm.
then there never is it as catastrophic as they make it seem. So
So
that's a
true.
very, very real practice I walk them through.
Hmm. Considering all the talk of your visa and stuff, what's next for you? What's on your agenda? I know you have some coaching, some courses, and what's next for Chelsea?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like personal life, I definitely want to travel more. Like
Hmm.
I said, we have
Yeah.
been in a major lockdown in Germany, and part of the appeal of moving over here with my partner was to be able to travel to all the different countries.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
that's what's on my vision board right now. I am
Hmm.
like ready to go to
Let her out.
Copenhagen. Yeah, I'm like, oh, I'm just ready to like run around Europe.
Yeah.
So, that is absolutely like I'm trying to take the whole month of August off. So, if anybody wants to work with me in August, I'm not going to be available
Fair
because
enough.
yeah, I want to take that whole month off if I can. So that's what's going on personal, just getting back out in the world and really trying to integrate more here in Germany.
Hmm.
It's been tough. It's a country that the language to me is hard to learn.
Yeah, I can
I don't know
imagine.
anybody here. I have no friends here, and so I'm really making an effort to turn this around by learning more German, trying to meet more people, and really trying to connect with expats here too. So
Mm-hmm.
personally, that's what's going on, and then professionally. I opened up spots to both my mindset and business coaching as well as podcast coaching. So they are separate. And I'm sure you can agree that podcasting is like its own beast. There's a
Yes.
lot to learn.
Hmm.
And so I do that separately. I help podcasters or people that are wanting to be podcasters go from idea to launch in a few months. And we will talk about everything like editing, interviewing, storytelling,
Hmm.
booking guests, recording, the whole nine yards. That's what's going down in podcast coaching, and there's four spots open for that. And then the mindset and business coaching could either be if you have a business or want to start one and you're just like overwhelmed with the next steps and you're not really clear on how to get it off the ground, I can work with you on that. Or if you want to make a career change. So this happens a lot too, where people are like, I don't want to start my own business, but I just don't want to be in my job.
Hmm.
And so we'll figure out a career change and help you get there. So there's two spots open for that. And then, like you said, with courses and workshops, I've run them kind of experimentally throughout the months based on what I'm feeling. So right now I'm running a spirituality course, but I definitely want to run a money and business course in the fall. So we'll see how it all goes and what I'm feeling inspired by. So you can always find that on my website at chelsearipe.com or my Instagram because I'm always posting on there all these updates.
Very cool. Very cool. And Chelsea, just lastly, is there anything that you would have asked yourself that I didn't that you would want to share with people listening?
Hmm. I guess the only thing, not that I wish you would have asked, but I guess that's like on my mind right now is that I'm not special. Like, I come from a very small town in Florida. I went to a traditional college. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
partied hard in my 20s. I dated really awful guys. I did really bad things. Like, and so I think sometimes when people see the position I'm in now, where, it sounds like magical. Oh my God, she lives in Europe with her boyfriend, has her own business. It sounds amazing, but I'm like, guys, I have a very regular family. We grew up eating fast food in America. Like, there's nothing special in my eyes about the way I grew up or the way I was raised. And I just feel called to share that because I would never want anybody to put me on a pedestal and think, like, oh, she's so far ahead, I can't do it. Because, like I said a year ago, I was working in gelato shops and nannying and cleaning and doing all these things. And
Hmm.
I think it's really important that people know, like, it was honestly through a bunch of falling on my face and just keeping going that I'm at where I'm at today,
Hmm.
and I'm still learning and finding my footing. But yeah, I just feel like called to share that.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, but I think special is a interesting choice of word. I understand exactly what you're saying, and I really appreciate the realness behind that. But Chelsea, you are extremely driven, and like I said before, the balls it took to just up and change your life. I know there are plenty of people who won't do it or who are so scared, and I just maybe it's not special, but it's worth talking about, and it's
Right.
definitely worth, the time for people to go check you out and listen to your podcast and your story, and even and potentially, work with you, because what you've done, particularly at, I think, I don't know, you're around 30 or so.
Yeah, I'm 30.
Yeah, what you've done at only 30 years old is it's really impressive, and I give you a lot of credit.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I will say I am resilient and I'm resourceful. So I will
Yes.
say those two things. I think those have served me really well. So thank you so
I
much.
think those
I
are,
really appreciate that.
you just hit yourself on the head from what I know. I mean, that is resilient and resourceful. Those are perfect words from what I've seen. I mean, even just, hey, I'm going to go to Australia. I mean, like, it's amazing. It's amazing. It really is. I don't want you to, I know you have a very, self-assured presence about you, and I know you're very connected to your feelings and your emotions and what you're capable of, but I really truly have to I would be remiss if I didn't remind you, I guess, of how really big that is, that you just got up and followed your heart and followed your path, because it's really really tough, and you're successful at it, and I really think that you're awesome.
Oh, thank you so much. I really honestly now I'm like, okay, I need to maybe talk to my therapist about this. Speaking of therapy, not discrediting myself, I'm gonna like book an appointment and
Yes.
talk that,
Yes.
bring it all full circle. But truly, I appreciate these words more than you know. Like you listen to my podcast, words of language are my words of affirmation are my love language. So I'm like beaming right now. Thank you.
All right. Well, Chelsea, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you.
So, I have to start by acknowledging how tangible and relatable Chelsea talks about manifestation, meditation, and spirituality. As you heard us talk about, I think these practices can often get a bad rep for being too out there, but Chelsea is as down to earth as they come. I thank her so much for that. I think we need more of that in this realm of the world. So, at one point in her life, Chelsea was many of us, a millennial feeling stuck. And it wasn't overnight that she changed the trajectory of her life. She's had to push through the imposter syndrome, dig deep in therapy, and truly tune into her inner self to begin to uncover who she is and what she wants out of life. And while she says she's, quote, not special, what I really think it is about her is that she acted on the thoughts, the desires, the impulses that many of us have, but we simply let pass us by. And while it may not be in the cards for you to quit your job and move abroad, it is in the cards for you to take a moment to reflect, to breathe, and to think about what you want. Are you living the life you want? What steps can you take to move towards living it? Is it finding a therapist? Is it working with a mindset coach like Chelsea? Is it waking up 15 minutes earlier to meditate? I've had to think about these things, and the one aspect of all of this that I really want to drive home here is that even when you decide to make a change, that the shifts might not happen immediately. Even this podcast you're listening to, theoretically, has taken years to come to fruition. I never knew what I wanted to do, but little by little, taking steps here, taking steps there, I finally figured it out. Now, that's just me. You might move faster, or you might already know what you want to do with your life or what you need to change to make it more of what you want. But often we get stuck in a pattern of what's comfortable. And I guess perhaps I'm just suggesting that maybe it's time to get uncomfortable. Perhaps it's time, like Chelsea says, to start visualizing the feelings you will feel when you make the changes you want to see in your life. I really love that idea and have implemented this in my own manifesting. The difference between visualizing the materialistic things that I want, the places I want to go, the people I want to interview, I sometimes get a desperate vibe from myself when I do that. But when I visualize what I will feel like when I get those things, when I go to those places, when I interview those people, whatever it is, honestly, my whole mood changes. even now I'm smiling. So it's pretty powerful. I think that Chelsea has a lot to teach us, and I feel like I could talk to her for a whole other hour. But in the meantime, go check her out on social media. Her website is absolutely stunning, and her podcast is a really, really wonderful resource to get started in this line of thinking if you're interested. Now, I do want to note that we recorded this episode in May of 2021, so her course offerings, her workshops, and what she currently has going on might have changed by the time you're listening to this. But let me tell you, just DM her, email her, find out what's coming next if you want to work with her. She's so down to earth, so chill, and she really just wants the best for people. So thank you so much, Chelsea, for your time, and thank you all for tuning in. Catch you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.